Top of the hour on a Friday, and you've been covering it and following it right here. Coming on the air right now with breaking news. A jury deciding former President Trump should pay more than $83 million for defaming writer E. Jean Carroll. The latest we're hearing from inside court as we're just now getting this verdict into us in just the last few minutes. Plus, rain, river ice, melting snow, creating dangerous conditions as a storm lingers over the Midwest. And it's not just there. What you can expect as you venture out this weekend. Then a court hearing wrapped up moments ago for the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students. What he's doing now to get the charges against him thrown out. And new moves tonight to overturn a ban that would essentially prevent trans women from competing in women's sports, like the Olympics. What we're learning about the legal case trans swimmer Leah Thomas has been quietly building. Plus, the growing effort across the country to restrict gender-affirming care. We'll talk to one family scrambling for solutions because of a loophole in one Missouri law. That is in tonight's original. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. Boy, is it a busy day, and I'm in for Hallie. And just in the last 15 minutes, we're learning that former President Trump will have to pay the writer E. Jean Carroll more than $83 million in her defamation case against him. The jury, unanimous, more than $18 million in compensatory damages. Plus the big number, the punitive number, the damages there, $65 million. Mr. Trump did not stick around for the verdict after a dramatic day in court. With this earlier moment caught in a court sketch, the former president stormed out as lawyers for Ms. Carroll delivered their closing arguments. You see her there leaving court today, a few minutes ago. Mr. Trump did not return until his own lawyer spoke. And that back and forth was not without its own drama. The judge repeatedly admonished her, Trump's lawyer, striking her comments from the record as she tried to deny the assault ever occurred. But here's the thing about that. That was not up for debate. A jury already ruled that Donald Trump did sexually assault Miss Carroll in the 1990s and has defamed her multiple times ever since. NBC's Rahema Hellas is joining us now, and she's been on the story all along. So, Rahema, tell us more about the verdict and about the fireworks in court today.
Yeah, this verdict was a clear indication of whose legal argument was believed in this civil case. And it was the E. Jean Carroll folks who seemed to have the more convincing argument for the jury, as they kept saying, imagine what this woman was going through. She was frightened. She was afraid. She didn't, her reputation was tarnished. She was closing her blinds at inordinate hours because she didn't know what was coming. And it was all because of the remarks that the former president had made about her. In countering that, Donald Trump's attorney said he can't be held responsible for what some other people may have said about E. Jean Carroll that he didn't have any control over. And they argue that he ought to be able to say certain things. In fact, one of the arguments Donald Trump's team made that got them into some trouble, he said you should know why he continues to make these statements, disparaging remarks about her, because they are true. At that point, the judge clearly and quickly sustained the objection and telling the jury that they are to disregard it. There was another instant of the similar kind of reference from Donald Trump's team. The judge, again, he said the objection is sustained, and he told Alina Habba, if you violate it again, there will be consequences. The consequences, it seems right now, Tom, have come in the form of the juries making its decision. As you point out, some $83.3 million in damages here, and part of it is for emotional harm, causing damages, causing pain and suffering. And then in the punitive portion, that's all about punishment. Mm-hmm. And E. Jean Carroll's attorneys were trying to say, you have to do something to make him stop this. They pointed out that in the first trial back in May of last year, he did not even show up one day for that civil libel trial where he was found liable of sexual assault and defaming her. But he was there several times in this particular case, and the E. Jean Carroll's attorney said It's because the first trial was right about reputation. This one is about money.
Yeah. Rahima, as you're speaking, the former president has been on Truth Social, his platform in which he releases statements. And this is what he says. Let me read it. Absolutely ridiculous, he's just put out. He says, I fully disagree with both verdicts and will be appealing this whole Biden-directed witch hunt focused on me and the Republican Party. He says our legal system is out of control and being used as a political weapon. They have taken away all First Amendment rights. This is not America. Point of fact here, this was a state court, not the federal DOJ that was pursuing this with E. Jean Carroll. Nonetheless, he has continued to use this as part of his real political platform, right? Trying to build his base, grow his base by claiming that he's the victim here, not E. Jean Carroll.
He has done it consistently again and again, and we've got a full screen we want to show you about the benefit that seems to come to the former president as a result of doing this kind of thing. His lead in terms of the polls continues to grow. Back in March, for the Hush trial, 16 points he gained in a lead. In June, federal classified documents, he went up 30 points. August 1st, federal election interference, another 36 points he went up in the polls. And then back in August 14th, the Fulton County election interference, he went up a whopping 40 points in the polls in terms of his lead over his opponents in this primary race for the nomination for the Republican nominee for president. So
let's underscore that.
Benefit him.
Rahima, yes, let's underscore that. Those are polls about how he's doing against his Republican opponents. And what's really critical, of course, is whether these cases are in any way damaging him with independents who will decide this election in November, right? That they're always the swing voters in this. And how much has he gained or lost among independents? And a lot of political analysts say independents are turned off by a lot of this.
That's what we are hearing, and even in the primary that happened up in New Hampshire earlier this week, there seemed to be some indication from the independent voters who were saying that this is not what they want to continue to hear from the former president, and they were voting accordingly. They did not back him, and he did not get that astounding win in terms of the 60, 70-point lead over at Nikki Haley that he was hoping for.
Yeah. Rahima, thank you very much. Rahima Ellis in New York. Let's bring in now NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, what comes to mind when you see this dollar amount, $83 million? That's a very big number, not as big as we saw recently with down in Georgia, right, in that case. But nonetheless, this is a big number.
It is, but it's in the heartland of what I would have expected. The plaintiffs were really putting on evidence of around, 12 million to 20 million. It's really in that range. And then when you look at the punitives that are a multiple of roughly 4 times the compensatory damages, those are going to be upheld on appeal. It's when you get into the 20 times the compensatory damages that you run the risk as a plaintiff's attorney of having that lowered on appeal, reduced on appeal, or overturned. So it's a huge number, but it is consistent with the evidence the plaintiffs put on. They did put on an expert to say, hey, in order to repair the reputation, and that was a specific facet of the damages, you're going to need about anywhere from somewhere around $10 to $12 million. The jurors obviously listened to that. So they looked at that. They gave assigned a dollar amount to her pain and suffering, or compensatory damages. And then the punitive damages, which were strictly designed to punish. In a way, they're not really even tethered to E. Jean Carroll's pain and suffering. They really only have to do with the defendant, with Donald Trump. The dollar amount it would take to dissuade him from doing this in the future, and really dissuade anyone else out there who may be watching and listening. So the challenge with defamation and the challenge with punitives is that they don't lend themselves to easy calculation. So to some degree, I imagine there was some debate in that jury room that we'll never know about. But they did have a few numbers to hang their hats on, and it looks like they did just that.
I was thinking of the Giuliani case when I mentioned Georgia a minute ago, but that was also defamation. It was also punitive damages. Are you surprised by how quickly this jury came back?
No, if I'm being candid, there are some factors that I'm sure weren't part of the jury instructions. Factor one being it's Friday, and factor two being it's 4:30 on Friday, and in New York City, traffic gets pretty bad right around now. So, look, I mean, that's just lawyer talk. I mean, we generally have feelings about why juries come back when they do. Often, they're not huge fans of working through the weekend. But look, every jury's different. I'm sure they took their job very seriously. But if I were being glib for a moment, I might say that it had a little bit to do with it being Friday afternoon at 4:30 p.m., right to the minute at the deadline set by the judge.
Yeah, he does say, the former president does say here that he will be appealing this case. Give us a sense of what are his chances on appeal in this?
Your chances on appeal are always poor. In other words, for the most part, the court's not going to look at everything de novo. Normally, facts are etched in stone for all purposes on appeal. And really what the defense is probably going to argue, I can already guess at what their main points are going to be. They're going to say, we weren't able to put on our case. Alina Habba certainly placed on the record. She preserved it for appeal, but she made a lot of arguments that Donald Trump should be able to testify about certain things that he wasn't allowed to testify about. For example, she wanted him to be able to testify a little bit more unregulated about his intent, and the judge largely shut that down. Look for that to be the centerpiece on appeal for the defense.
Hey, Danny, one more thing. Let me have you put your political hat on here, because there's been a lot of speculation that money doesn't really matter to Mr. Trump. He's allegedly a billionaire. Some people take issue with that. That for the most part, these dollar figures are a drop in the bucket for him. Is this enough to dissuade him from continuing to make these comments against E. Jean Carroll, or might he continue to do it because he thinks it's worth the price that he's paying just in terms of the publicity he gets on the evening news?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. There is some hard evidence that when Donald Trump gets in legal trouble, it seems to help him politically. But, I mean, no one has infinite money, certainly not Donald Trump. And look, the plaintiff brought in Donald Trump's best foot forward. It was his most bragging example of evidence, because in his other New York case, strangely enough, he had every incentive to puff himself up and say he was worth so much more in his New York State Attorney General brought case just across the street from this case. So the plaintiff in this case used that evidence against him. It was really quite brilliant. They brought in that testimony. There he is saying, I'm worth billions and billions of dollars. And so that's probably Trump's higher estimate. So I would assume this punitive damages award would hurt even Donald Trump. It has to. I don't care who. It might even make Elon Musk or give him pause. Maybe not. But you see my point. Only a very dozen or so people would be unhurt by a punitive damages award like this.
And a reminder, this was a civil case, not a criminal case. Danny, thank you very much for your expertise. Okay, a hard left turn here to the weather, because, boy, the storms this weekend will bring a wet and wintry mess to all sides of the country. And that mix is already causing dangerous conditions, forcing people to evacuate. In Texas, swollen rivers forced evacuations from an RV park there. A similar situation outside of Chicago. People were forced to evacuate there. The National Weather Service warns stay away or be swept away as the nearby river continues to rise, causing, as you can see there, major ice flooding. And the eastern half of the country feels really unseasonably warm. Here in Washington, D.C. today, it got up to about 75 degrees. Unbelievable change. The warmest temps we've seen in January for an awful long time. So let's now go to Maggie Vespa, who's in Wilmington, Illinois. I'm sorry to rub it in there, Maggie. They were out there sunning themselves today here in D.C., and it looks like you're still bundled up. It looks pretty serious where you are with the flooding.
Tom, it is serious. How dare you? And yes, it is absolutely serious out here. I mean, you can see behind me, just with the trees, where they're submerged here in the floodwater, how high this water's gotten. 3.5 feet and counting since Wednesday. That's how fast this has been rising. Now I want to show you video of why. And this is the really staggering part of this story. It's called an ice jam. We have the video. It's basically a nature-made dam, for those who aren't familiar, of ice that's kind of packed together along the river. And as it gets larger, as it gets thicker, it keeps a lot of that water flow at bay. Well, then you kind of think logically, walk that forward. Once it starts to break apart, which it did do this week, that's when you see a lot of that water flow basically rushing forward. And that's largely what's causing the flooding that we're seeing here. And it speaks to, it's kind of caused by that temperature swing that you're touching on ever so painfully in D.C. We've also seen that here in the Midwest. We were at like -10, if you remember, just a week or two ago. Now we're close to 40 today. So the ice is melting, it's breaking apart, and we have this fast rising river as a result. I talked to a couple of homeowners who were literally watching their homes flood along the river. One of them has lived here 20 years. He said he's never seen anything like it, not nearly this bad. They said this is just mind-blowing to watch, even for people who are used to life along the river here in Wilmington. Take a listen.
To see it like this, it's so high up, that's the amazing part, and you can't do anything.
I watched the river flows like right in front of me, faster than I've ever seen it. And that water came running out of it faster than I could get all my stuff out of there.
And I want to be clear, we're a little bit downstream, and I know this is not quite as staggering as the ice flow that we showed you that video of. The reason that we're here is because once that thing breaks apart, the water can rush in really quickly. So we're kind of staying where we believe is safe. But this is a fast-moving flood as that kind of sporadically breaks down and that ice jam starts to melt. Just to put a little context on how long this could last, the original flood warning was set to expire tomorrow morning. Officials have said this thing is still breaking apart. There's still a lot of ice that kind of has to melt down and just break apart and float downstream. So these flood waters could continue to rise well into the weekend. AKA, Tom, this could get a lot worse. I'll send it back to you.
The end of January, that's a lot of water. Okay, Maggie, thank you very much. Just moments ago, the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students tried and failed to get the charges against him thrown out again. Now, here he is in court. You see him sitting at the desk on the right. He has a suit on. He's accused of stabbing to death the 4 students in their off-campus home back in November of 2022. He has pleaded not guilty, and we want to show the names and the faces of the victims here because all of them, of course, matter. All of them dearly missed by their families. Let's bring in Elwin Lopez, NBC News, out in California to give us an update on this case. And Elwin, this is a second attempt at trying to get his charges dropped, and a lot of the apprehension from the state and the judge was how any appeal by the defense would delay the trial. So do we have any guidance then on when the trial might kick into action?
Yeah, Tom, this was another shot by Koberger's defense team to get the indictment against him dismissed. Now, remember, he had waived his right to a speedy trial, then filed several motions citing prosecutorial misconduct, grand jury bias, among other things. This, of course, all seen by legal experts as a tactic to delay going to trial, and the judge once again denying those motions. Now, as you mentioned, the back and forth on setting a date. So we were hoping to hear from the judge on that trial date to be set today. He said he wanted to think about this, though, for a bit and even apologize to the victims' families for not having a date set. Now, Koberger's defense team said they wouldn't be ready by summer of this year, which is what the state wanted. Now, they say there has been a lot of challenges around discovery due to the vast amount of files that they still need to sift through. They also mentioned that they would file a motion to change the venue of the trial due to its high-profile nature. The state, of course, pushing back on this. Now, I want you to take a listen as to what the prosecution had to say about the nature of the case.
I don't want to lose sight of the fact of the seriousness of this case. We are talking about a quadruple homicide. Under Idaho's law, not only are those who were killed victims, but every single one of their immediate family members is a victim.
And he said that because they are also entitled to a timely resolution of this litigation. Now, unfortunately, Tom, they will have to continue to wait. What we do know is that Kaylee Gonzalez's family was in court listening to all of this, and they told us before that hearing that they were hoping to have a trial date set by the end of today, but that does not seem likely, Tom.
Okay, we'll check back, Elwin. Thank you very much, Elwin Lopez, for us. Tonight, the controversy over fake pornographic images of Taylor Swift, reaching all the way now to the White House, which says it is, quote, alarmed by the use of AI deepfake technology. Meanwhile, Microsoft's CEO is defending to NBC News his company's ability to keep people like Swift and all of us safe from the power of AI. Here's what he told our Lester Holt.
What does that tell you about this technology and whether we could ever get the toothpaste back in the tube?
I would say 2 things. One is, again, I go back to, I think, what's our responsibility, which is all of the guardrails that we need to place around the technology so that there's more safe content that's being produced, and there's a lot to be done there and a lot being done there. But it is about global societal I would say convergence on certain norms. And we can do, especially when you have law and law enforcement and tech platforms that can come together. I think we can govern a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
So these questions raised after the so-called deep-fake AI-generated images depicting Swift went viral on X, and more were taken down from the site only after a mass reporting effort from Swift's fans. NBC's Hallie joins us now. She's near the White House. And the White House today, Hallie, has been saying for more than a year how concerned it is about AI. So is something actually going to be done here in Washington? What could be done, and who's going to do it?
Yeah, Tom, those are all great questions, and calls for answers to those questions have certainly grown in the aftermath of this deepfake circulating of Taylor Swift. As you mentioned, we heard about this from the White House today. This is not a new problem for the White House. They have certainly been monitoring this, as you mentioned. And remember, the president himself was a victim of this deepfake technology earlier this week when a fake robocall of him circulated through New Hampshire ahead of the primary there earlier this week. But White House officials are saying that this is certainly a growing problem. It's certainly a more alarming problem, and it's a problem that disproportionately affects women and girls in this country. Listen to what Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say about the regulation of this technology in today's White House press briefing.
While social media companies make their own independent decisions about content management, we believe they have an important role to play in enforcing their own rules to prevent the spread of misinformation and non-consensual intimate imagery of real people. Of course, Congress should take legislative action. That's how you deal with some of these issues, obviously.
The press secretary in that briefing pointing to an executive order that the president issued back in October to help regulate AI. It boosted safety standards for AI technology, and it also compelled private AI companies to report their data and their information for their AI projects to the federal government. That is something that Republican lawmakers and industry lobbyists and advocates are staunchly against. They're saying that this is a massive overreach by President Biden and his administration. That is not stopping the White House, for one, also Taylor Swift's fan base, as you mentioned in the intro there, and also some of these Democratic lawmakers who have introduced legislation to regulate AI from renewing those calls to, at least in some of the cases of these Democratic lawmakers, be able to have deep fake technology become a federal crime for that use. So the White House, as I mentioned, renewing those calls. Whether or not that happens, Tom, in this current makeup of this current Congress is very slim. But this is really bringing a lot of eyes and attention to the debate around the government's regulation and ability to have control over these private businesses. Certainly a debate that's going to continue, Tom.
Well, the internet and AI travel at warp speed, and Congress doesn't. Washington doesn't. So it's a tough nut to crack. Thank you very much, Hallie. Hallie Roth at the White House. You can catch more of Lester Holt's sit-down interview with the CEO of Microsoft. That'll be on Tuesday's NBC Nightly News. The International Court of Justice today ordered Israel to do all it can to limit the killing in Gaza and stop any acts that could amount to genocide there. But the court stopped short of calling for a complete ceasefire. That's something that South Africa has asked for when it brought allegations of genocide before the UN's top court in The Hague earlier this month. The court also calling on Hamas to release all of its hostages still in Gaza, as Israel's right-wing security minister calls the whole thing, in his words, Hague schmeg. Hague, again, the capital in the Netherlands. So what does today's decision mean, and what comes next? NBC's Megan Fitzgerald has more.
The International Court of Justice now out with a provisional ruling in South Africa's case against Israel, telling Israel to take all steps possible to prevent genocide, but not ordering the ceasefire that South Africa wanted. Israel's prime minister criticizing the ruling, but satisfied the United Nations highest court didn't go further.
Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state. and it was justly rejected.
The ruling, which told Israel to prevent genocidal acts by its forces and punish public figures who incite genocide, is just the first step. South Africa wants the ICJ to ultimately decide whether Israel's actions violate the Genocide Convention. Israel denies the accusations. South Africa arguing that limited humanitarian aid and mass loss of life, which the Hamas-run Ministry of Health says is a majority women and children, constitutes genocide. And the country pointing to statements from Israeli officials that could be interpreted as having genocidal intent, like these October 9th comments from Israel's defense minister. Saying, we are fighting human animals and we are acting accordingly. Israel this week declassifying documents that it says show Netanyahu directing officials to try to increase the flow of aid, water, and fuel into Gaza, despite some of his more incendiary statements in public. The court also ruled basic services and humanitarian assistance must be allowed into Gaza. It could take a few years for the court to make a final decision on the genocide question, but today's preliminary ruling allowing the case to move forward, already mocked by some in Israel. Far-right Minister of National Security writing in Hebrew on X, Haig Shmeig. The court also saying Hamas should release all hostages unconditionally. But the big question, enforcement. It doesn't have the power to execute its ruling, instead relying on the UN Security Council and member countries. It's unclear if Israel, with broad backing from the United States, will actually listen, but experts say ignoring it could have consequences.
Actions that it takes on the battlefield risk being construed as further evidence of what might actually amount to genocide down the road.
And Megan Fitzgerald joins us now. Megan, the court really doesn't have any teeth, right? I mean, it can't send out the police to enforce this. So what comes next?
Right. So, Tom, Israel has 1 month to submit a report to the court on the steps that it's taken to comply with the court's orders, including making sure that they're taking measures to improve the humanitarian situation for the people in Gaza. If they don't do anything, that could significantly hurt their case moving forward. Tom?
All right, Megan, thank you very much. Megan Fitzgerald in London for us. Right now, the first Boeing 737 MAX 9 is scheduled to be taking off out of Seattle's airport 3 weeks after that near disaster on an Alaska Airlines flight where the door plug on the MAX 9 blew out midair. Those planes were then grounded by the FAA until Alaska and United Airlines thoroughly inspected the planes before putting them back into service. Today's flight, Seattle to San Diego, one of 3 MAX 9s going back into the air today, 2 more scheduled for later in the evening. But a lot of people are still worried about flying on the plane and whether there's a bigger problem with Boeing. The company held a safety quality stand down yesterday, holding employee meetings and insisting that they must do better. My colleague CNBC's Phil LeBeau joins me now. Phil, the NTSB tells me it expects to have a preliminary report next week. And the big question that you and I have discussed, whether that door plug that blew off was ever properly bolted in place in the first place.
Well, look, ultimately, that plane was put out by Boeing. It came out of their plant, so they're ultimately responsible. And the question is, who at Boeing or what team at Boeing was working on that door? And if it was not bolted into place as it should have been, who had access to it? And why was there not a double check in terms of that door when it was put in place if there was work being done? All of those questions, I think, will come out with the NTSB report, Tom, and I'm sure that Boeing is already preparing for how to address the questions that are going to be out there in terms of how do we know this isn't going to happen again?
Yeah. Well, the fact that Alaska has found many planes with loose bolts and United has found planes with loose bolts suggests this is not a one-off. In other words, maybe they didn't put any bolts in this particular door. We don't know, but clearly some bolts were never tightened down to begin with.
Right. And that brings up the question, how could something so obvious not be checked on a regular basis? That should be standard protocol. You and I know that. Anybody who works in manufacturing or works with manufacturers realizes that's basic manufacturing there. And that's why Boeing, from the beginning, has taken ownership of this and has said, look, we dropped the ball big time, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Now, whether or not they can convince regulators that they have made the changes or will make the changes to avoid this in the future, that's going to play out over the months to come.
So you and I have discussed on the phone, let's bring this conversation on air, what has happened to Boeing's culture? If they've had this significant of a breakdown in quality control, it's what everybody's asking, NTSB, FAA, Congress, and it comes 5 years after the MAX 8 crashes that killed 346 people. What has happened to Boeing's culture?
Nobody knows for sure. That's the frustrating part of this, Tom. I've talked with people who have worked at Boeing, still work at Boeing. I've talked with people who deal with Boeing because they're in other companies. And the one thing that does come up, and this is not an excuse for this door plug being ripped off of the Alaska Airlines plane, the pandemic led to a number of people retiring, either taking buyouts or retiring, and they're gone. That's a lot of institutional knowledge that's out the door, and it's not coming back. Now, that doesn't explain or doesn't justify saying, well, that's an excuse for what happened here. But it is interesting when you have such a complex piece of machinery, a brand new airplane that has hundreds of people working on it. There are a lot of people who are in new jobs, and it doesn't mean that they're all not qualified. There are dozens of quality people at Boeing. It just means that that's one thing that people will be focused on.
Yeah. And yesterday we heard one of the top VPs at Boeing say they deserve the attention. They deserve the scrutiny. Phil, thank you very much. CNBC's Phil LeBeau covers it like nobody else. We appreciate it. Still ahead from us, more good news about the economy. The Fed's favorite figure shows inflation is, in fact, cooling. Could the Fed cut rates sooner rather than later? And more AI news, why the estate of one of America's most influential comedians, there he is, taking aim at a new AI-generated special. It's fake. Stay with us. We're back, and the Fed's favorite measure of inflation today showed just a small rise in prices. It's the latest indicator that inflation could be coming under control. The number was better than what the experts thought, and that is fueling hope that interest rates could start to come down, maybe earlier than expected. The president is also riding high on these numbers, saying that this is an important milestone that means more breathing room for working families. NBC's Brian Chung joins me now. He loves to geek out on this like I do. Brian, break down the numbers. What do they mean for average Americans and how they're living their lives every day?
Yeah, well, what's telling us is that the picture on inflation is improving. It's not yet quite mission accomplished, but look, in some measures, it shows that economists are having the inflation numbers right where they want it to be. So again, let's rehash the numbers, the figures from this morning showing that inflation pacing at a 2.6% pace over the course of the December to December period. And this coincides with the economic growth data that we got yesterday that we talked about as well, Tom, showing that Q4 growth, again, how much did the economy grow in the final 3 months of last year? It exceeded expectations at 3.3%. So in tandem with these two things, the economy is growing and inflation is coming down. That tells you that this is not at all a recessionary environment. That's good for Americans that have been seeing, for the most part, again, it's going to depend on who you're talking to, their jobs remaining in place with wages also increasing. That was part of today's report as well. People are holding their jobs. The economy is growing. Wages are outpacing inflation. The question is, can that hold in 2024? Economists saying they hope so, but there still is a chance of recession. We'll just have to see how the next few months play out, Tom.
And I keep getting the emails that this is a Goldilocks economy, so we'll see how long it lasts. Thank you, Brian. Brian Chung. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, UK health officials say England could see a serious outbreak of measles. Cases have already been spiking there with more than 200 confirmed cases, 100 probable cases since October. The government says more people need to get vaccinated, but vaccination rates in England have been dropping for years. It's not just Europe. At least 3 U.S. states have reported an increase in measles cases within the past month. Number 2, we're just hearing that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is going to return to the Pentagon on Monday. That, according to defense officials, this will be his first time back since he was hospitalized a few weeks ago for complications with his prostate cancer surgery. He spent a few weeks in the hospital and has been working from home ever since. Number 3, the estate of George Carlin is suing the makers of an AI-generated stand-up special featuring the comedian who died back in 2008. The lawsuit accuses the AI company of stealing a great American artist's work and asks for the AI recreation to be removed. The company has not responded to the lawsuit. Number 4, Tesla recalling about 200,000 cars over a software glitch with its rear-view cameras. It affects 2023 versions of the Models S and X and Y vehicles. Tesla says it released a software update to car owners to help them fix the problem. It is now the 15th recall for the company in just the past year. Number 5, a new study is finding that writing is a lot better for your brain than typing. It says that writing by hand leads to more elaborate brain connectivity patterns, which helps with learning, with processing, with information, and your memory. My mom could have told you that. Coming up, police in Hawaii make an arrest in that chemical attack. What we're learning about the suspect. Plus, new comments today from Alabama's Attorney General after the state became the first to execute a person using nitrogen gas. Why the AG says there it is right there, and it should be an example for the rest of the country. But will the country follow? We're back in a minute. Tonight, Alabama's Attorney General is taking a kind of victory lap after the state became the first ever to successfully execute a person using nitrogen gas. The AG, Steve Marshall, says Alabama has set an example for the rest of the country.
What occurred last night was textbook. As of last night, nitrogen epoxy as a means of execution is no longer an untested method. It is a proven one.
A reminder, the state put Kenneth Eugene Smith to death after his conviction for his role in the 1988 murder of Elizabeth Sennett. But now there are questions about how humane his death was based on media members who witnessed his execution. NBC's Emily Ikeda is following all of this now for us. And Emily, the AG is almost defending himself here. What do we know for sure about how this execution actually went down?
Hey there, Tom. So as you mentioned, we're hearing from media witnesses that had seen the execution play out. There was also members of Smith's family that had witnessed the execution and members of the victim's family as well. So just to give you some of the TikTok of what happened, officials say that they pulled back the curtain. Everything began around 7:53 p.m. last night. Kenneth Smith was pronounced dead at 8:25 p.m. And they say that nitrogen flowed for 15 minutes. So I should note it's not exactly clear how long it took for Smith to die. And speaking to some of those media witnesses, they say that he remained conscious for several minutes into the execution, and then he appeared to start shaking and thrashing on the gurney for another 2 minutes. That was followed by several minutes of deep breaths until those breaths were no longer perceptible by witnesses. Prison officials say that he appeared to be trying to hold his breath and that they were expecting some involuntary movements. Remember, this is a first of its kind execution that has sparked scrutiny, concern, raised questions from the White House today, also from around the world. The UN today calling for an abolishment of the death penalty in the U.S., Tom.
Let's not forget the family of the victim here, Elizabeth Sennett's family. Her sons say this is not a happy day, right?
Yeah, they described it as a bittersweet moment. You can imagine this is a very difficult thing to witness, but they say it is the final chapter in what has been a decades-long journey to justice. As you mentioned, their mother, Elizabeth Sennett, was brutally murdered more than 3 decades ago. Here's more from her son.
We're not going to be jumping around, hooping and hollering, hooray and all that. That's not us. But we're glad this day is over.
3 states. Alabama is one of 3 states that have approved nitrogen hypoxia, and the state's attorney general says there are 43 other death row inmates who selected that method for their execution, Tom.
Okay, Emily, thank you. Emily Ikeda there. NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day, and because it's really tough to read, to watch, to listen to everything, our bureau teams have done it for you, and this is what they say is going down in their regions. They call this segment The Local. From our Western Bureau, Honolulu police have arrested a man for attempted murder in that chemical attack we told you about. Remember, the suspect threw a liquid substance at a woman before running away. The victim is still in the hospital and says she did not know the man. or why he did it. Police are still investigating. Out of our Northeast Bureau, authorities found 100 animals, some exotic and some endangered, at a Long Island home. The animals, including ducks, a variety of reptiles, and ostrich, were found in cages across the property. The homeowner says he was showing them off for money, and now an animal protection organization is fining him thousands of dollars and relocating the animals to sanctuaries. From our Washington Bureau, these might look like your average CDs and vinyls, but they're actually checked out from a library years ago. A library in Maryland came across a Pink Floyd CD in its book drop and an Eddie Rabbitt vinyl, both late by about 3 decades. The library doesn't carry CDs and vinyls anymore. Who does? Nor does it charge for late returns. But the staff was still excited to see the old relics finally make a comeback. Relics? No, not relics. Coming up, an NBC News exclusive. We're live in Beijing with the new details around talks between the U.S. and China to stop the fentanyl crisis. Next. Back now with an NBC News exclusive. U.S. officials will hold high-level talks with their Chinese counterparts on America's deadly fentanyl crisis. Senior Chinese officials tell us they will sit down with teams from the DEA and Homeland Security in China sometime next week. Beijing accused of allowing the flow of so-called precursor chemicals for fentanyl. You can see the process right here. It's complicated. The chemicals move from China to Mexico, where cartels then finish the job, synthesize the final product, and then it all moves into the United States. And here in the U.S., it's an exploding crisis. In just 2022 alone, more than 70,000 people died from overdosing on synthetic opioids like fentanyl, including just kids. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer got the scoop. She joins me now from Beijing. Janice, you're sitting down with one of the top Chinese narcotics control officers. And what are you hearing about any concrete action that they could take that would come out of this meeting?
Tom, this meeting has been in the works for months. The U.S. has long accused China of doing little to limit the trade of precursors that are being used to make the fentanyl that's killing so many Americans, or go after the banking networks or Chinese websites that are making this an easy and lucrative venture for these smuggling rings. There are strict laws here against fentanyl as a substance, but literally tens of thousands of possible precursors or pre-precursors, many which have legitimate uses that are also being used to synthesize the illicit fentanyl. I spoke with Yu Haibin. He's Deputy Director General of the Narcotics Control Bureau with China's Ministry of Public Security. Here's what he had to say.
Over the past 4 years, as China has tightened control over fentanyl substances, the number of deaths in the United States due to the consumption of fentanyl substances increased instead of decreased. This is worth thinking about. It shows that China has never been the source of the fentanyl problem in the United States.
There has been no meaningful cooperation between the two sides on counter-narcotics since 2020. That's when the U.S. sanctioned 2 police labs under the Ministry of Public Security. So there's been no exchange of information on what these new precursors could be, the ones that they should be watching for. Getting those 2 police labs off the entity list was a prime priority for the Chinese side. That happened in November, just after President Biden met with Xi Jinping in San Francisco. It was a trade-off to try to pave the way for this meeting that's happening next week. Tom?
You anticipated my question, Janice, because has that summit that we're showing right there between Biden and Xi, has that in any way helped to thaw the relationship between these two countries? Does this narcotics announcement help to thaw the relationship?
Well, over the past few months, we have seen the two sides re-engage on several issues. Military leaders recently spoke for the first time in a year. There's cooperation on things like AI safety. And, of course, this crucial issue of trying to do something to stem the opioid crisis. But there is a lot of skepticism, Tom, and there's reason for that. Even an issue as painful and pressing as opioid deaths in the United States can be secondary to politics and political tension. The higher the tension is between the U.S. and China, the lower the cooperation. And as we've seen, talks can be derailed. So there are very tempered expectations heading into next week. Tom?
The sun is not up in Beijing, but Janice is. Janice, thank you very much. We appreciate your reporting. Still to come from us, transgender swimmer Lia Thomas is eyeing the Olympics. We're talking about the legal action Thomas is taking against the World Aquatics to get there. Stay with us. Back now, NBC News has learned that transgender swimmer Lia Thomas has quietly been mounting a legal challenge to rules that would keep Thomas out of the Olympics and other top-level competitions. A lawyer for Thomas says the challenge brought to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland looks to overturn rules issued back in 2022 that prohibit trans women from competing in women's swimming events unless they transitioned before the age of 12. World Aquatics, the group that made the rule, did not respond to NBC's request for comment. And those rules were issued just a few months after Thomas made history in March of 2022, becoming the first openly transgender woman to win an NCAA swimming championship. Let's bring in now NBC's David Noriega for more on the story. And David, where does public opinion fall on this issue right now? Because most Americans at this point seem to support laws that protect transgender women from discrimination.
Right, Tom. So polling over the years has found some pretty complicated and at times contradictory opinions among Americans on various questions of trans rights. When asked in general terms, as you said, some 64% of Americans support laws protecting trans rights. But when asked in more specific terms about this question of trans athletes, 69% of Americans are of the opinion that trans athletes should only be allowed to participate in teams matching their assigned sex at birth. And by the way, that number has gone up in the years since Lia Thomas has become sort of a flashpoint for this particular debate. Now, what trans rights advocates would say is that in spite of the polling, these two issues aren't so easily separated because the debate around trans athletes and their participation in sports comes in the context of a pretty widespread campaign of anti-trans legislation. In Texas, for example, which is Lia Thomas's home state, Texas is one of 22 states in the United States that has passed laws restricting trans athletes' abilities to participate in sports. What trans rights advocates say is that particularly in the youth sports context, where sports are important for things like community and belonging and mental and physical health, this is excluding kids from participating in things that would be good for them and is part of this larger campaign that they say is designed to make their life difficult, if not impossible. Tom?
So this legal challenge actually started, as I understand it, back in the fall. Why are we just hearing about it now? And will it be settled before she were to go to the Olympics?
So the international body that's overseeing this case, by default, its cases are confidential. That's why we're only hearing about it now, because it leaked to the press, basically. And NBC has confirmed that information with Thomas's legal team. And the short answer is no. It is highly unlikely to affect Thomas's ability to participate in this year's Olympics, not least because she isn't registered currently with USA Swimming, the American swimming governing body. Now, whether it might affect her ability to participate in the 2028 Olympics here in LA, that remains to be seen. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it, David. Turning to other news in the transgender community right now, we want to bring you today's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we have been trying to keep an eye on here. This week, Ohio moved to ban gender-affirming care for minors and restrict trans women and girls from participating on sports teams. The Ohio State Senate voted to override the governor's veto on the measure. So what is the impact of these laws? Tonight, we take you to Missouri, which also has a law restricting gender-affirming health care for minors. It has families there scrambling for new solutions out of state. NBC's Maura Barrett has that story.
16-year-old Levi Hormuth's childhood was spent struggling with his identity, one where he formally identified as her. Before starting his gender-affirming journey, Levi experienced anxiety and depression and had started self-harming. But that changed thanks to a haircut, new clothes, and the care at Washington University's Transgender Center.
During all of the changes, I felt fantastic. I felt a lot better than I had ever been. I haven't self-harmed since.
1 year on testosterone, his transition has been a relief, but Missouri's new gender-affirming care ban halted his future plans.
We were prepared. We have like a good 20 bottles of testosterone stocked up for now, but of course it's not going to last us forever.
The ban was supposed to allow existing patients who are minors to be grandfathered in and continue care. Instead, they saw their prominent transgender center halt medical care. Washington University saying it was due to a loophole in the law creating legal liability for providers.
So we have some that are like 2026 expiration.
The unexpected change has left his parents scrambling and frustrated with lawmakers.
I feel like we are getting attacked from all sides.
We've been violated as parents, as a family. It's frustrating. We can't parent our child the way that we see fit. We're dealing with rhetoric. We're not dealing with fact.
Missouri State Representative Brad Hudson advocated for the law to be passed, saying he objects to the term gender-affirming care and wants to protect the state's children.
I think if we really wanted to affirm these kids, we wouldn't tell them that they're born in the wrong body.
When you look at studies, they consistently show that lack of access to care in this way is linked to high rates of suicide, depression, self-harming behavior. So how is something that goes against that protecting kids in your mind?
This has more to do with the fact of that they're struggling with gender dysphoria, and they do need help. There's no doubt about it. But I'm saying that the kind of, quote, help, unquote, that some folks have been trying to give them has done more harm than good.
Instead, Levi's family is left to figure out care alternatives out of state.
Whatever we have to do, we will.
Chicago, their preferred plan due to access to a full medical center, would mean a 5-hour drive each way every month. Or Missouri patients have access to the Fairview Heights Planned Parenthood just across state lines. It's in Illinois, but it's run by the St. Louis region. This structure planned intentionally in the wake of abortion battles. Now, every state surrounding Illinois has also introduced at least one anti-LGBTQ healthcare bill.
They are attacking folks who are the most marginalized. These are all tactics that have been used to eliminate abortion access and now have just been pivoted to gender-affirming care, but on a much accelerated timeline.
Elements of this legislation goes directly against guidance from the American Medical Association. I mean, what do you make of that?
Seeing this ideology replace science is so painful. There is a tool that they can use to help their child, but it has been taken away from them.
One of the first people a new out-of-state patient will talk to is a registered nurse like Elizabeth Vick, who acts as a liaison between gender-affirming care patients and their insurance providers, physicians, and pharmacies, essentially any potential roadblocks families might face. Since the ban took effect in late August, she's noticed a difference.
We've definitely seen an increase in our 16 and 17-year-old patients.
What potential risks are you worried about in terms of your patients if they're not able to get the care they need?
I'm concerned that we are going to see more instances of self-harm amongst minors. I'm concerned that we're going to see an increase of bullying.
Here she is.
And unfortunately, back in Wentzville, Missouri, that's the case for Levi. Kids throwing things at him on the school bus, a development he initially hid from his parents.
They're already doing so much for me, and I shouldn't have to stress them out about this. I shouldn't. Because then they're gonna think, like, did we do the right thing? And they did. Of course, like, I'm the best I've ever been.
We heard so much from Republican lawmakers putting this into place, saying that it was to protect children.
I don't feel protected. We are children who know what is wrong with our bodies because it's our bodies, not yours. Leave us alone. Leave us alone and let us be happy.
Maura Barrett, NBC News, Wentzville, Missouri.
That is a wrap for this hour, but the news continues right now on News Now. Good afternoon, good evening. It is a very busy Friday. We come on the air, more breaking news. A jury deciding former President Trump should pay more than $83 million for defaming writer E. Jean Carroll. The latest we're hearing from court, the chances for an appeal, and the reaction from Mr. Trump. And then what seems to be the most serious damage caused to a commercial ship by those Houthi rebels, since the group's attacks in the Middle East started. What our Pentagon team is just now learning in the last hour. Plus, rain, river ice, melting snow, creating dangerous conditions as a storm lingers over the Midwest. And it's not just there. What you can expect as you venture out this weekend. And the White House weighing in on fake pornographic images of Taylor Swift and the renewed calls for legislation. What Microsoft's CEO is saying about how the company is planning to protect users from AI being used in the wrong ways. Plus, the Fed getting a new signal tonight that inflation could be coming under control. What that might mean for your wallet this year. Good day, I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie Jackson. Happy Friday. In just the last hour, we're hearing that former President Trump will have to pay the writer E. Jean Carroll more than $83 million in her defamation case against him. You see Ms. Carroll today leaving the federal court in New York after posing pictures with her legal team. Mr. Trump did not stick around for the verdict. Instead, he went to Las Vegas for a rally after a dramatic day in court where at one point he stormed out of the courtroom. The jury unanimous on the breakdown. You see right there, more than $18 million in compensatory damages. But the big number, the punitive damages, $65 million. Mr. Trump vowing to appeal. He calls the verdicts ridiculous and saying this is not America. There's also a broader perspective to keep in mind that these fireworks really are part of a preview of the Trump legal strategy. As you know, he faces a whole web of issues with trials that could start this year, and some include criminal charges like in Georgia or from the federal government, and that could mean prison time. Trump storming out of court today isn't the first time we've seen that from the former reality TV star putting on a show. You remember his drawn-out trips to Fulton County, Georgia, or in Manhattan, huge motorcades that then led to mugshots. All of it in an attempt to fire up his base and win back the White House, as polling in one state where Republicans already voted for Mr. Trump this year, Iowa, shows 80% of Republicans won't bat an eye if he is convicted. We will get the legal breakdown from Danny Savalos in just a moment, but let's begin with NBC's Raheem Ellis, who's been following all of it for us from court. Raheem, break it down. What did you see? What did you hear? And it was a pretty dramatic day.
Yeah, and as you point out, there were some fireworks even in the courtroom before the jury was given an opportunity to have its say in this case. Just pointing out one of them, and that is with Alina Habba, and that is she was leading the Trump legal team. She attempted to try to, on several occasions, to walk a fine line of going beyond what the judge says they were able to do, and that was you were not going to relitigate this case. But at one point, she attempted to say to the jury that Trump has consistently stated his position as an American right, and that's why you were constantly hearing statements and tweets from him about how he never knew Jean Carroll, that this was a hoax, this was a lie, it was a con job, and there was an objection to that, and the judge said, you can't talk about that. You can't say that he has any legal standing in that regard, and because it's been established. And she says, yes, it's been established by a jury. He says, it is established, and you will not quarrel with me, telling her to finish her presentation. There were a couple of other instances like that. And that argument she made was that E. Jean Carroll was benefiting by these statements, that she was gaining in popularity and publicity. But the Carroll team had a counter-argument, and that was that this was damaging to her psyche, to her sense of self, to her sense of safety, and that she was getting tweets that were just horrible, calling for her death, calling for her to be raped. And in the end, it appears that the jury agreed with that argument. And to your point, that last question of the jury is asked, did Mr. Trump act maliciously out of hatred, ill will, or spite, vindictively, or in wanton, reckless, or willful disregard of Ms. Carroll's rights? They said yes. And at that point, they awarded him $65 billion. One of the things that you would hear and not be surprised by, I think we have a sound bite of Alina Habba following the verdict right outside the courthouse. Do we have that bite?
And the behavior I saw in there, some of which was reported widely today, gave us the most perfect record on appeal, and even if I needed it, which I don't, we were stripped of every defense.
Whether they were stripped of any defense, of course, that's something that's going to be considered on appeal. But even the talk about the makeup of this jury and whether or not they were an arm of the anti-force of him being elected, it's important to remember that this was a jury. They're anonymous. 9 members, 7 men, 2 women, and some would say just ordinary Americans. One, a retired transit worker, another, a 37-year-old female publicist with a tech company, a 56-year-old German-born woman with 2 children, and a 46-year-old doctor. That's who made up this jury, and that's the jury that said unanimously that Donald Trump should be paying $83.3 million in damages to E. Jean Carroll.
Yeah, it's a civil case, not a criminal case, and as we know, this is actually how this goes down for essentially slander and libel. Talk about how this is also a political strategy for Mr. Trump, and his only remaining Republican challenger, Nikki Haley, is actually now taking some shots at him as well.
Yeah, she is, because the former president was making remarks about this case, and instead of mentioning E. Jean Carroll's name, he put in Nikki Haley's name. For example, this was the tweet from Nikki Haley. She's talking about what the president said, former president said in misspeaking. She says, wait a second, did Trump just say the person suing him is running for office? Is he confused again? I was not in a New York City courtroom yesterday any more than I was in charge of security at the Capitol on January 6th. I was in South Carolina meeting with voters. They'd like to see a debate between me and Trump. He got it wrong. Nikki Haley was not the subject in this trial. Tom?
Rahima, strap in. It's only going to get more interesting over the coming weeks and months. Rahima Ellis covering the trial from New York. Thank you very much. All right, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, Mr. Trump says he'll vow to appeal. What are his chances?
Always slim. When you're appealing, it's not a brand new, fresh look at the case. Most of the issues the appellate court will give deference to. But Trump's defense team gave us a preview, and it was no surprise. Their argument's going to be that they were not permitted to put on their case, that evidence was excluded that should have been included. But of course, when it comes to evidence inclusion or exclusion, appellate courts give great deference to the trial court. The trial court really has almost complete authority as to what evidence comes in and does not come in, unless it's patently irrelevant or just completely out of line. For the most part, this is a really difficult argument to make. But Alina Habba is right about one thing. They made the record. In other words, no one on appeal is going to say, hey, you didn't mention this at the trial court level, because she certainly raised these issues many times.
So can we drill down on that? What about that argument from the former president that the judge shut him down when he tried to speak his mind? He clearly was not staying in the framework of what the judge was allowing in terms of conversation in the courtroom, but he did tell the former president, stop talking.
Here's the way the appellate court will generally look at that. If it's a piece of evidence that came in that the appellant is saying should not have come in, or vice versa, the court will usually apply abuse of discretion. So in other words, even if they might have arrived at a different decision, the appellate court, the trial court has so much authority to decide what evidence comes in and doesn't come in. Appellate courts recognize this is often made in the fast-paced environment of a trial, and a judge has to be able to have control over what evidence is admitted and not admitted. In terms of being able to put on their case, it's a closely related issue. But look, they may be able to argue, possibly, that issues, for example, that by limiting Trump's testimony, they limited his ability to talk about punitive damages, in other words, his ill will, his spite. That might be an argument on appeal, but it's going to be an uphill battle no matter what.
And let's just remind the audience that the decision, whether he is liable, was already reached. A jury already said, yes, he's liable for sexual assault. This was about awarding her the compensation, not about whether he committed the act. That's already been decided in a civil case.
Yes, in a sense, liability was decided by a jury, but also by a judge who took that determination in the first defamation case and essentially applied it to the second defamation case, which very confusingly is numbered in reverse, because it just so happens that because of appeals, this case was tried later, even though it was the first in time. So, yes, that issue was already decided against Trump. He never testified in any element of the liability cases, either one of them. And so now he did testify in this damages case, which is curious given the fact that the time to challenge what E. Jean Carroll was saying, or whether or not you ever met her, would have been on the liability phase. This was a very narrow set of issues. That's why the trial lasted a little over a week. You will not see this with any other Trump trial, civil or criminal. The issues here were narrowed really to a pinhole. There were barely any facts that had to come in. So for that reason, that's why you have such a short trial. You're not going to see that again.
Got it. Danny, thank you, and have a nice weekend. We appreciate your expertise. Thank you. Some breaking news just into us just now. The crew of a commercial oil tanker in the Gulf of Aden is now in lifeboats after it was hit by a Houthi missile. That lit the tanker on fire. 2 U.S. defense officials are telling this to NBC News. The attack appears to have caused the most serious damage to any of the ships hit by Houthi missiles since the Israeli-Hamas war started. We go now to NBC's Courtney Kube, who's following all of this. Courtney, what more are you learning?
Yeah, so this ship was hit by an anti-ship cruise missile fired by the Houthis from Yemen earlier today, and it seems that it struck some sort of a tank area and caused this fire. The crew sent out a distress signal, and they started battling that fire. But, Tom, what's not clear right now is whether the ship is seaworthy anymore. Defense officials think one of the reasons that the crew may have moved into these lifeboats off the ship is because it actually contains this highly flammable liquid that's sort of like a crude oil. And there is a very real concern if there's a fire, obviously, near this flammable liquid. But the a U.S. Navy ship is now on site, the USS Carney, as well as a French frigate, and they're assessing the situation. But as you mentioned, this is not the first time that the Houthis have hit a commercial ship in the last several months with a missile. But this does appear at this point to be the most significant strike in terms of damage and impact on the ship that we've seen to date, Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. I don't recall hearing about the crew abandoning any other ships in the Red Sea because of the activity with the Houthis.
Yeah, there have been other ones that have been hit. There was even one that was pretty badly damaged, but so far they've all been seaworthy enough that they've been able to make their way on their own. This is the first time that we've heard about, that we know of, where the crew has actually had to, for now, abandon the ship. And the reality is, again, the defense officials are not saying that the ship is sinking, that they have to completely abandon it, that they may not be able to go back on board. But clearly the situation is dangerous enough that the crew feared enough to leave the ship behind, Tom.
And given the U.S. and the U.K. action there against the Houthi rebels, might we expect to see another reprisatory attack, I should say, tonight or in the next few hours?
I don't know that I think we should be looking for something tonight, but I think what viewers need to keep in mind is that we will likely continue to hear about strikes against the Houthis, against targets, for the foreseeable future. So they won't all be the sorts of pre-planned strikes that we've now become somewhat accustomed to, that the U.S. and the U.K. did together now twice. But we have seen a number of what the military would call dynamic or even preemptive strikes. And what that means is they see a threat, they target it to take it out because they consider it an imminent threat to commercial or military ships in the region. And why that's also significant is that can happen a lot faster. There's this pre-authorized authority that the head of U.S. Central Command, the regional U.S. military commander there, has in one of those cases. It's a case of self-defense, frankly, Tom.
You've got British, French, and U.S. ships right there in the region, and so it is a tinderbox, isn't it, right now? Courtney, we got to make it quick, but your quick assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the real concern is that if we see one of these Houthi missiles or drones hit a ship, cause real damage and casualties, there's a real concern of escalation here, Tom.
Courtney Kube on the story from the Pentagon. Thank you, Courtney. All right, to the weather now. And storms this weekend will bring a wet and wintry mess to all sides of the country. And that mix is already causing dangerous conditions, forcing people to evacuate. Take a look at Texas. Swollen rivers, forcing evacuations from an RV park there. A similar situation outside of Chicago. People forced to evacuate. And the National Weather Service warned, stay away or be swept away, as the nearby river there, really ice water, continues to cause major flooding. And the eastern half of the country feeling some unseasonably warm temps today. Here in D.C., it felt more like spring. We got up to the mid-70s today. Records for the warmest January temps at both Reagan and Dulles airports. Let's go now to Maggie Vespa, who's in Wilmington, Illinois. It's turning dark there. It's probably cold and the water is rising, right, Maggie?
Yeah, Tom, that's exactly right. And it's rising really quickly, which is what has people here, even who have lived here for decades, really nervous, more than they ever have been, a lot of them tell us, about what this could turn into. And I want to show you video again of why. This is the most jarring sight of this story to me. This is called an ice jam here on the Kankakee River in Illinois. It is, get this, 12 miles long. That is among the largest ice jams ever recorded on this river. And basically, it built up, people here tell us, really quickly amid all the crazy freezing winter weather we've had in the last month or so. And now we have this warm front moving in. Temps today were around 40, and it started breaking apart and melting really fast. Essentially, what that means is there was sort of like a nature-made dam because of this ice that is now breaking down and letting water just swell this river really quickly. So again, it's up 3.5 feet since Wednesday, just in 48 hours. People here who say they see their homes being slowly flooded, knowing this could rise more, say this is the worst situation they've seen as far as winter flooding in this area since they've lived here, one man, for more than 20 years. Take a listen.
To see it like this, it's so high up, that's the amazing part, and you can't do anything.
I watched the river flows like right in front of me faster than I've ever seen it, and that water came running out of it faster than I could get all my stuff out of it.
And so again, Tom, we said 3.5 feet since Wednesday. Here's the key, by the way, and you can see a lot of families. You can hear them coming down to look at this themselves. It's that breathtaking. The ice has not completely broken down just yet. More is set to fall off. So this flooding, this rising of this swollen already river could continue well into the weekend. And that's what has people here, again, really nervous about how much worse this could get. Tom.
Yeah, that's a lot of water and a lot of ice. Maggie, thank you very much. Late today, the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students tried and then failed to get the charges against him thrown out again. So here he is. You see him sitting there at the desk in court. He's the one on the right with a suit. He's accused of stabbing the 4 students to death in their off-campus home back in November of 2022. He has pleaded not guilty. Let's put up the faces and the names of the victims here and their families, as you would expect. Miss them dearly. Let's bring in now Elwin Lopez for more on all of this. Elwin, it's been already 14 months since these murders and still no trial date set today. Are these motions from the defense seen as just a delay tactic?
Yeah, Tom, that's right. And it seems to be working according to legal experts. We were all expecting a trial date to be set today, but it looks like that will not happen. The state was eyeing this summer, but Kohberger's defense team said they would not be ready by then. They cited the vast amount of discovery and files that they still need to go through. They did, however, say that with the state's help, they might be comfortable going to trial March of 2025. That would be more than 2 years after those brutal killings, Tom. Setting that trial date has, of course, been top of mind for the victims' families. The judge today acknowledging what they are going through. Take a listen.
I can't even imagine the pain, the grief, because you can't really go forward with your life with this hanging over your head. So, sorry.
And Tom, for Kaylee Gonsalves' family, that was a face-to-face apology because they were in court today hearing that back and forth between the prosecution and the defense. And we spoke to them before that hearing. The one thing that they were hoping for, Tom, was to leave court today with a date for that trial. But of course, they are now leaving without it. Tom.
Well, the whole thing is outrageous and sickening. These 4 lives cut short, and it was just for nothing. Elwin, thank you very much. Tonight, the controversy over fake pornographic images of Taylor Swift reaching all the way to the White House, which says it is, quote, alarmed by the use of AI deep fake technology. Meanwhile, Microsoft's CEO is defending to NBC News his company's ability to keep people like Swift and all users safe from the power of AI. Here's what he told NBC's Lister Holt.
What does that tell you about this technology and whether we could ever get the toothpaste back in the tube?
I would say 2 things. One is, again, I go back to, I think, what's our responsibility, which is all of the guardrails that we need to place around the technology so that there's more safe content that's being produced, and there's a lot to be done there and a lot being done there. But it is about global societal I would say convergence on certain norms. And we can do, especially when you have law and law enforcement and tech platforms that can come together. I think we can govern a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
Well, the questions raised after the so-called deepfake AI-generated images depicting Swift went viral on X and were then taken down from the site only after a mass reporting effort from Swift's fans. NBC's Hallie is posted up near the White House for us with more. The White House today, Hallie, has been saying for more than a year how concerned it is about AI. So is something actually going to be done here in Washington? What could be done and who's going to do it?
Yeah, Tom, those are all great questions, and calls for answers to those questions have certainly grown in the aftermath of this deepfake circulating of Taylor Swift. As you mentioned, we heard about this from the White House today. This is not a new problem for the White House. They have certainly been monitoring this, as you mentioned. And remember, the president himself was a victim of this deepfake technology earlier this week when a fake robocall of him circulated through New Hampshire ahead of the primary there earlier this week. But White House officials are saying that this is certainly a growing problem. It's certainly a more alarming problem, and it's a problem that disproportionately affects women and girls in this country. Listen to what Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say about the regulation of this technology in today's White House press briefing.
While social media companies make their own independent decisions about content management, we believe they have an important role to play in enforcing their own rules to prevent the spread of misinformation and non-consensual intimate imagery of real people. Of course, Congress should take legislative action. That's how you deal with some of these issues, obviously.
The press secretary in that briefing pointing to an executive order that the president issued back in October to help regulate AI. It boosted safety standards for AI technology, and it also compelled private AI companies to report their data and their information for their AI projects to the federal government. That is something that Republican lawmakers and industry lobbyists and advocates are staunchly against. They're saying that this is a massive overreach by President Biden and his administration. That is not stopping the White House, for one, also Taylor Swift's fan base, as you mentioned in the intro there, and also some of these Democratic lawmakers who have introduced legislation to regulate AI from renewing those calls to, at least in some of the cases of these Democratic lawmakers, be able to have deepfake technology become a federal crime for that use. So the White House, as I mentioned, renewing those calls. Whether or not that happens, Tom, in this current makeup of this current Congress is very slim, but this is really bringing a lot of eyes and attention to the debate around the government's regulation and ability to have control over these private businesses. Certainly a debate that's going to continue, Tom.
Well, the internet and AI travel at warp speed, and Congress doesn't. Washington doesn't. So it's a tough nut to crack. Thank you very much, Hallie. Hallie Roth at the White House. Still ahead, more good news, believe it or not, about the economy. The Fed's favorite figure shows inflation is in fact cooling. So could the Fed cut rates sooner rather than later? And more AI news, why the estate of one of America's most influential comedians, George Carlin, is taking aim at a new AI-generated special. That's coming up. Hey, did you get up early for this? The Fed's favorite measure of inflation came out this morning, showing just a small rise in prices. It is the latest indicator that could indicate inflation is getting under control. The number was better than what the experts expected, and that is fueling hope that interest rates could start to come down maybe earlier in the year than expected. The president riding high on these numbers, saying that this is an important milestone that means more breathing room for working families. NBC's Brian Chung joins us now. He loves to geek out on this like I do. Brian, break down the numbers. What do they mean for average Americans and how they're living their lives every day?
Yeah, well, what's telling us is that the picture on inflation is improving. It's not yet quite mission accomplished, but look, in some measures, it shows that economists are having the inflation numbers right where they want it to be. So again, let's rehash the numbers, the figures from this morning showing that inflation pacing at a 2.6% pace over the course of the December to December period. And this coincides with the economic growth data that we got yesterday that we talked about as well, Tom, showing that Q4 growth, again, how much did the economy grow in the final 3 months of last year? It exceeded expectations at 3.3%. So in tandem with these two things, the economy is growing and inflation is coming down. That tells you that this is not at all a recessionary environment. That's good for Americans that have been seeing, for the most part, again, it's going to depend on who you're talking to, their jobs remaining in place with wages also increasing. That was part of today's report as well. People are holding their jobs. The economy is growing. Wages are outpacing inflation. The question is, can that hold in 2024? Economists saying they hope so, but there still is a chance of recession. We'll just have to see how the next few months play out, Tom.
And I keep getting the emails that this is a Goldilocks economy, so we'll see how long it lasts. Thank you, Brian. Brian Chung. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the Museum of Natural History will close certain halls that feature Native American artifacts as a result of updated federal regulations. President Biden signed an executive order last month requiring museums to get consent from tribes before displaying some artifacts. Starting tomorrow, the museum's Eastern Woodlands and Great Plains halls will be closed. Number 2, Las Vegas might run into a transportation problem for this year's Super Bowl. Union bus drivers and mechanics there overwhelmingly voting to reject their latest contract offer from private company Transdev today, authorizing a potential strike during the Super Bowl. Transdev says it has not gotten a formal strike notification from the union, which has to legally give 30 days written notice before a walkout. Number 3, the estate of George Carlin suing the makers of an AI-generated stand-up special featuring the comedian, but he died back in 2008. The lawsuit accuses the AI company of stealing a great American artist's work and asks for the AI recreation to be removed. The company has not yet responded to that lawsuit. Number 4, Illinois lawmakers want to ban certain food chemicals found in some candies and sodas. The bill would target chemicals like potassium bromide and red dye number 3, which scientists link to serious health problems. Products that could be impacted include Skittles and hot tamales. Oh no. 1 year ago, California became the first state to pass a similar law. Number 5, a new study finding that writing is a lot better for your brain than typing. See, Mom was right. It says that writing by hand leads to more elaborate brain connectivity patterns, which helps with learning, with processing information, and then helps your memory. Tonight, Alabama's Attorney General is kind of doing a victory lap after the state became the first ever to successfully execute a person using nitrogen gas. The state AG, Steve Marshall, says Alabama has set an example for the rest of the country.
What occurred last night was textbook. As of last night, nitrogen epoxy as a means of execution is no longer an untested method. It is a proven one.
Remember, the state put Kenneth Eugene Smith to death after his conviction for a role in the 1988 murder of Elizabeth Sennett. But now there are questions about how humane his death was based on media members who witnessed the execution. Emily's Emily Akeda joins us now. And Emily, the AG is almost defending himself here. What do we know for sure about how this execution actually went down?
Hey there, Tom. So as you mentioned, we're hearing from media witnesses that had seen the execution play out. There was also members of Smith's family that had witnessed the execution and members of the victim's family as well. So just to give you some of the TikTok of what happened, officials say that they pulled back the curtain. Everything began around 7:53 p.m. last night. Kenneth Smith was pronounced dead at 8:25 p.m. And they say that nitrogen flowed for 15 minutes. So I should note it's not exactly clear how long it took for Smith to die. And speaking to some of the those media witnesses, they say that he remained conscious for several minutes into the execution, and then he appeared to start shaking and thrashing on the gurney for another 2 minutes. That was followed by several minutes of deep breaths until those breaths were no longer perceptible by witnesses. Prison officials say that he appeared to be trying to hold his breath and that they were expecting some involuntary movements. Remember, this is a first-of-its-kind execution that has sparked scrutiny, concern, raised questions from the White House today, also from around the world. The UN today calling for an abolishment of the death penalty in the U.S., Tom.
Let's not forget the family of the victim here, Elizabeth Sennett's family. Her sons say this is not a happy day, right?
Yeah, they described it as a bittersweet moment. You can imagine this is a very difficult thing to witness, but they say it is the final chapter in what has been a decades-long journey to justice. As you mentioned, their mother, Elizabeth Sennett, was brutally murdered more than 3 decades ago. Here's more from her son.
We're not going to be jumping around, hooping and hollering, hooray and all that. That's not us. But we're glad this day is over.
3 states, Alabama is one of 3 states that have approved nitrogen hypoxia, and the state's attorney general says there are 43 other death row inmates who selected that method for their execution, Tom.
Okay, Emily, thank you. Emily Ikeda there. Coming up, Colombia is declaring a national disaster over wildfires there, while firefighters are saying that the conditions could actually get worse. That story's coming up. We're back, and right now, the first Boeing 737 MAX 9 is scheduled to take off out of Seattle's airport 3 weeks after that near disaster on an Alaska Airlines flight where the door plug on the Boeing MAX 9 blew out midair. Now, take a look. We've got the airport on a monitor while we're watching to see when the plane actually lines up on the ramp. But the flight is happening after those planes were then grounded by the FAA, of course, until Alaska and United Airlines thoroughly inspected the entire MAX 9 fleet before putting them back into service. Today's flight, Seattle to San Diego, is one of 3 MAX 9s going back into the air. 2 more are scheduled for later today, all on the West Coast. But a lot of people are still worried about flying on these planes and whether there's a bigger problem with Boeing. The company held a safety quality stand down yesterday, holding employee meetings and insisting they must do better. My colleague CNBC's Phil LeBeau joins me now. Phil, the NTSB tells me it expects to have a preliminary report next week, and the big question that you and I have discussed, whether that door plug that blew off was ever properly bolted in place in the first place.
Well, look, ultimately, that plane was put out by Boeing. It came out of their plant, so they're ultimately responsible. And the question is, who at Boeing or what team at Boeing was working on that door? And if it was not bolted into place as it should have been, who had access to it? And why was there not a double check in terms of that door when it was put in place if there was work being done? All of those questions, I think, will come out with the NTSB report, Tom, and I'm sure that Boeing is already preparing for how to address the questions that are going to be out there in terms of how do we know this isn't going to happen again?
Yeah. Well, the fact that Alaska has found many planes with loose bolts and United has found planes with loose bolts suggests this is not a one-off. In other words, maybe they didn't put any bolts in this particular door. We don't know, but clearly some bolts were never tightened down to begin with.
Right. And that brings up the question, how could something so obvious not be checked on a regular basis? That should be standard protocol. You and I know that. Anybody who works in manufacturing or works with manufacturers realizes that's basic manufacturing there. And that's why Boeing, from the beginning, has taken ownership of this and has said, look, we dropped the ball big time, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Now, whether or not they can convince regulators that they have made the changes or will make the changes to avoid this in the future, that's going to play out over the months to come.
So you and I have discussed on the phone, let's bring this conversation on air, what has happened to Boeing's culture? If they've had this significant of a breakdown in quality control, it's what everybody's asking, NTSB, FAA, Congress, and it comes 5 years after the MAX 8 crashes that killed 346 people. What has happened to Boeing's culture?
Nobody knows for sure. That's the frustrating part of this, Tom. I've talked with people who have worked at Boeing, still work at Boeing. I've talked with people who deal with Boeing because they're in other companies. And the one thing that does come up, and this is not an excuse for this door plug being ripped off of the Alaska Airlines plane, the pandemic led to a number of people retiring, either taking buyouts or retiring, and they're gone. That's a lot of institutional knowledge that's out the door, and it's not coming back. Now, that doesn't explain or doesn't justify saying, well, that's an excuse for what happened here. But it is interesting when you have such a complex piece of machinery, a brand new airplane that has hundreds of people working on it. There are a lot of people who are in new jobs, and it doesn't mean that they're all not qualified. There are dozens of quality people at Boeing. It just means that that's one thing that people will be focused on.
Yeah. And yesterday we heard one of the top VPs at Boeing say they deserve the attention. They deserve the scrutiny. Phil, thank you very much. CNBC's Phil LeBeau covers it like nobody else. We appreciate it. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories each day, and you know it's awfully tough to read, to watch, to listen to everything. So our international teams have broken down a highlight reel for you. This is what they say they're keeping an eye on. We call this the Global. From Colombia, its government there has declared a disaster, and that's why, right there, wildfires tearing through the country with warm and dry conditions only expected to make it all worse. Colombia's president says the U.S. and other countries are helping out. He did not specify how. From the UK, King Charles is, we're told, doing well. That according to his wife, the Queen, after a planned prostate treatment today. He was diagnosed earlier this month with an enlarged prostate. That's a benign condition. It's awfully common in older men. He visited Kate, the Princess of Wales, at the hospital. She is recovering from abdominal surgery. It's not clear what kind of surgery. The King's upcoming appearances have been postponed while he recovers. Out of Japan, this is the new Miss Japan, and her win is stirring up a lot of controversy around what means to be Japanese. She was born in Ukraine, but has lived in Japan since she was 5. And she is a Japanese citizen. But some say if she doesn't have Japanese blood, she should not get to represent Japan. She says she hasn't always felt accepted in Japan and wants to help build a society that doesn't judge the way that people look. Coming up from us, an NBC News exclusive. We are in Beijing with the new details around talks between the U.S. and China to stop the fentanyl crisis. Coming up next. Back now with an NBC News exclusive. U.S. officials will hold high-level talks with their Chinese counterparts on America's deadly fentanyl crisis. Senior Chinese officials tell us they will sit down with teams from the DEA and Homeland Security in China sometime next week. Beijing accused of allowing the flow of so-called precursor chemicals for fentanyl. You can see the process right here. It's complicated. The chemicals move from China to Mexico, where cartels then finish the job, synthesize the final product, and then it all moves into the United States. And here in the U.S., it's an exploding crisis. In just 2022 alone, more than 70,000 people died from overdosing on synthetic opioids like fentanyl, including just kids. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer got the scoop. She joins me now from Beijing. Janice, you're sitting down with one of the top Chinese narcotics control officers. And what are you hearing about any concrete action that they could take that would come out of this meeting?
Tom, this meeting has been in the works for months. The U.S. has long accused China of doing little to limit the trade of precursors that are being used to make the fentanyl that's killing so many Americans, or go after the banking networks or Chinese websites that are making this an easy and lucrative venture for these smuggling rings. There are strict laws here against fentanyl as a substance, but literally tens of thousands of possible precursors or pre-precursors, many which have legitimate uses that are also being used to synthesize the illicit fentanyl. I spoke with Yu Haibin. He's Deputy Director General of the Narcotics Control Bureau with China's Ministry of Public Security. Here's what he had to say.
Over the past 4 years, as China has tightened control over fentanyl substances, the number of deaths in the United States due to the consumption of fentanyl substances increased instead of decreased. This is worth thinking about. It shows that China has never been the source of the fentanyl problem in the United States.
There has been no meaningful cooperation between the two sides on counter-narcotics since 2020. That's when the U.S. sanctioned 2 police labs under the Ministry of Public Security. So there's been no exchange of information on what these new precursors could be, the ones that they should be watching for. Getting those 2 police labs off the entity list was a prime priority for the Chinese side. That happened in November, just after President Biden met with Xi Jinping in San Francisco. It was a trade-off to try to pave the way for this meeting that's happening next week. Tom?
You anticipated my question, Janice, because has that summit that we're showing right there between Biden and Xi, has that in any way helped to thaw the relationship between these two countries? Does this narcotics announcement help to thaw the relationship?
Well, over the past few months, we have seen the two sides re-engage on several issues. Military leaders recently spoke for the first time in a year. There's cooperation on things like AI safety. And, of course, this crucial issue of trying to do something to stem the opioid crisis. But there is a lot of skepticism, Tom, and there's reason for that. Even an issue as painful and pressing as opioid deaths in the United States can be secondary to politics and political tension. The higher the tension is between the U.S. and China, the lower the cooperation. And as we've seen, talks can be derailed. So there are very tempered expectations heading into next week. Tom?
The sun is not up in Beijing, but Janice is. Janice, thank you very much. We appreciate your reporting. Still to come from us, transgender swimmer Leah Thomas is eyeing the Olympics. We're talking about the legal action Thomas is taking against the World Aquatics to get there. Stay with us. Back now, NBC News has learned that transgender swimmer Leah Thomas has quietly been mounting a legal challenge to rules that would keep Thomas out of the Olympics and other top-level competitions. A lawyer for Thomas says the challenge brought to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland looks to overturn rules issued back in 2022 that prohibit trans women from competing in women's swimming events unless they transitioned before the age of 12. World Aquatics, the group that made the rule, did not respond to NBC's request for comment. And those rules were issued just a few months after Thomas made history in March of 2022, becoming the first openly transgender woman to win an NCAA swimming championship. Let's bring in now NBC's David Noriega for more on the story. And David, where does public opinion fall on this issue right now? Because most Americans at this point seem to support laws that protect transgender women from discrimination.
Right, Tom. So polling over the years has found some pretty complicated and at times contradictory opinions among Americans on various questions of trans rights. When asked in general terms, as you said, some 64% of Americans support laws protecting trans rights. But when asked in more specific terms about this question of trans athletes, 69% of Americans are of the opinion that trans athletes should only be allowed to participate in teams matching their assigned sex at birth. And by the way, that number has gone up in the years since Leah Thomas has become sort of a flashpoint for this particular debate. Now, what trans rights advocates would say is that in spite of the polling, these two issues aren't so easily separated because the debate around trans athletes and their participation in sports comes in the context of a pretty widespread campaign of anti-trans legislation. In Texas, for example, which is Leah Thomas's home state, Texas is one of 22 states in the United States that has passed laws restricting trans athletes' abilities to participate in sports. What trans rights advocates say is that particularly in the youth sports context, where sports are important for things like community and belonging and mental and physical health, this is excluding kids from participating in things that would be good for them and is part of this larger campaign that they say is designed to make their life difficult, if not impossible. Tom?
So this legal challenge actually started, as I understand it, back in the fall. Why are we just hearing about it now? And will it be settled before she were to go to the Olympics?
So the international body that's overseeing this case, by default, its cases are confidential. That's why we're only hearing about it now, because it leaked to the press, basically. And NBC has confirmed that information with Thomas's legal team. And the short answer is no. It is highly unlikely to affect Thomas's ability to participate in this year's Olympics, not least because she isn't registered currently with USA Swimming, the American swimming governing body. Now, whether it might affect her ability to participate in the 2028 Olympics here in LA, that remains to be seen. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it, David. Turning to other news in the transgender community right now, we want to bring you today's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we have been trying to keep an eye on here. This week, Ohio moved to ban gender-affirming care for minors and restrict trans women and girls from participating on sports teams. The Ohio State Senate voted to override the governor's veto on the measure. So what is the impact of these laws? Tonight, we take you to Missouri, which also has a law restricting gender-affirming health care for minors. It has families there scrambling for new solutions out of state. NBC's Maura Barrett has that story.
16-year-old Levi Hormuth's childhood was spent struggling with his identity, one where he formally identified as her. Before starting his gender-affirming journey, Levi experienced anxiety and depression and had started self-harming. But that changed thanks to a haircut, new clothes, and the care at Washington University's Transgender Center.
During all of the changes, I felt fantastic. I felt a lot better than I had ever been. I haven't self-harmed since.
1 year on testosterone, his transition has been a relief, but Missouri's new gender-affirming care ban halted his future plans.
We were prepared. We have like a good 20 bottles of testosterone stocked up for now, but of course it's not going to last us forever.
The ban was supposed to allow existing patients who are minors to be grandfathered in and continue care. Instead, they saw their prominent transgender center halt medical care. Washington University saying it was due to a loophole in the law creating legal liability for providers.
So we have some that are like 2026 expiration.
The unexpected change has left his parents scrambling and frustrated with lawmakers.
I feel like we are getting attacked from all sides.
We've been violated as parents, as a family. It's frustrating. We can't parent our child the way that we see fit. We're dealing with rhetoric. We're not dealing with fact.
Missouri State Representative Brad Hudson advocated for the law to be passed, saying he objects to the term gender-affirming care and wants to protect the state's children.
I think if we really wanted to affirm these kids, we wouldn't tell them that they're born in the wrong body.
When you look at studies, they consistently show that lack of access to care in this way is linked to high rates of suicide, depression, self-harming behavior. So how is something that goes against that protecting kids in your mind?
This has more to do with the fact of that they're struggling with gender dysphoria, and they do need help. There's no doubt about it. But I'm saying that the kind of quote help unquote that some folks have been trying to give them has done more harm than good.
Instead, Levi's family is left to figure out care alternatives out of state.
Whatever we have to do, we will.
Chicago, their preferred plan due to access to a full medical center would mean a 5-hour drive each way every month. Or Missouri patients have access to the Fairview Heights Planned Parenthood just across state lines. It's in Illinois, but it's run by the St. Louis region. This structure planned intentionally in the wake of abortion battles. Now, every state surrounding Illinois has also introduced at least one anti-LGBTQ healthcare bill.
They are attacking folks who are the most marginalized. These are all tactics that have been used to eliminate abortion access and now have just been pivoted to gender-affirming care, but on a much accelerated timeline.
Elements of this legislation goes directly against guidance from the American Medical Association. I mean, what do you make of that?
Seeing this ideology replace science is so painful. There is a tool that they can use to help their child, but it has been taken away from them.
One of the first people a new out-of-state patient will talk to is a registered nurse like Elizabeth Vick, who acts as a liaison between gender-affirming care patients and their insurance providers, physicians, and pharmacies. Essentially, any potential roadblocks families might face. Since the ban took effect in late August, she's noticed a difference.
We've definitely seen an increase in our 16 and 17-year-old patients.
What potential risks are you worried about in terms of your patients if they're not able to get the care they need?
I'm concerned that we are going to see more instances of self-harm amongst minors. I'm concerned that we're going to see an increase of bullying.
Here she is.
And unfortunately, back in Wentzville, Missouri, that's the case for Levi. Kids throwing things at him on the school bus, a development he initially hid from his parents.
They're already doing so much for me, and I shouldn't have to stress them out about this. I shouldn't. Because then they're gonna think, like, did we do the right thing? And they did. Of course, like, I'm the best I've ever been.
We heard so much from Republican lawmakers putting this into place, saying that it was to protect children.
I don't feel protected. We are children who know what is wrong with our bodies because it's our bodies, not yours. Leave us alone. Leave us alone and let us be happy.
Maura Barrett, NBC News, Wentzville, Missouri.
That is a wrap for this hour, but the news continues right now on News Now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.